Okay, what I'm going to talk about very briefly, this morning we were talking about communities and the big picture in LEED for neighborhood development and what's happening with the city as a whole. This afternoon we're sort of drilling down to specific building types. This is going to be about schools. What's a green school in our version of it? Why should we care? And then attributes of a green school and a local example of a LEED Gold school, which is actually in Detroit. At the last bond, they decided to build to LEED standards, and we actually have 7 schools in the Detroit Public Schools that are LEED certified. I think this has been said already. Why should we care about buildings? Because buildings use 71% of the energy in the United States. They create 65% of the waste. And 39% of the, or actually it's up to 47% of the CO2 emissions. Cars are always beaten up because they create so much CO2 emissions, but actually buildings are worse. So what can we do about it? We can build green buildings, reduce this waste, reduce the water use, reduce the CO2 emissions. Everybody said, yeah, that's a great thing to do, but nobody did anything about it. So the short story is, a group of people got together and came up with a LEED rating system. They said, let's provide a checklist. Let's provide incentives for people to actually do this for green buildings. And they came up with a leadership in energy and environmental design. I always have to read that because I can never remember what it means. But the LEED rating system, which focuses on 5 different categories: sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials, resources, indoor air quality, and this is a LEED V3 slide, so it's missing the new LEED V4, which is location and transportation. And I'm going through this fast because I'm sure most of you already know this and or have heard it already today. And then you know that USGBC has 4 levels of certification for LEED: certified, silver, gold, and platinum. It's sort of like when you get a rating on your building, you kind of have a nutrition label for your building in the energy and atmosphere category. Okay, LEED started out with just new buildings, new office buildings. That's what it was created for. And once they'd done that, people were saying, well, what about existing buildings? What about schools, hospitals? So it has evolved into various rating systems now that handle both new construction and existing buildings, commercial interiors, core and shell, now also building types like healthcare, retail, and schools. And today, we're going to talk about schools. Like I said, the best part already has been here. Why should we care about schools? Because actually 20% of the whole population of the United States goes to a school every day. And so our vision is all those schools that people are spending so much time inside of will be green schools. When, as I said, the kindergartners have kindergartners within 1 generation, we expect that we won't have to stand up here and talk about green schools. Everybody will be already in one. This is a definition that we've come up with to kind of say what a green school is: a healthy environment conducive to learning while saving energy, resources, and money. So what does that all mean? The LEED rating system for schools addresses similar things as they do in other buildings like offices and things like that. But there are a few credits that are specific only to schools, and we'll talk about those. One of them is lighting and daylighting. I don't know whether anybody in here is old enough to remember the oil embargo of the 70s, but at that time, all these large windows in schools all got boarded up with EFS, and they left little portholes so you could see whether it was raining, because we didn't have the window technology to save energy that was escaping through those windows. Well, schools became dark, damp little places. And now that we have the technology with better insulation with our windows, people are bringing back the big skylights and windows in the school. And somebody said, well, wait a minute. You're going to distract the students. They're going to be looking out the window all the time, and that's going to be really bad for school. They found the opposite was true, that actually having a connection with the outside kind of relieved the stress of school. Children could actually glance outside, see some relief of what's going outside and then actually concentrate better on the tasks that they have. Daylighting will also, as long as we make sure that we don't, that we provide shades and controls so that we don't have glare, also allows us to turn off the lights most of the time, which we haven't done in this room, I see, which is allows cost savings. Thermal comfort is a big thing. When you have kids in schools that are either too hot or too cold, they're sitting there with their winter jacket, or they have to move because it's raining through the ceiling in their classroom, they're obviously not going to be able to concentrate on what they're trying to study. So LEED also addresses thermal comfort in right-sizing HVAC systems and providing adequate insulation in the building envelope. Acoustics is a big thing for schools. It's not a credit in any of the other LEED rating systems because a noisy classroom, the students can't listen. If we're adults, we can probably see what somebody's saying. They don't hear the whole word. We have a large enough vocabulary to sort of figure out what I just said. But students that are young and have not had a developed vocabulary have a hard time. If they don't hear the whole message, they can't understand what's going on, and then they shut off, and they can't learn. So reverberation time in a room and softening interior finishes are some of the things that people use. We just had a whole presentation yesterday in our Lunch and Learn about speaker systems for classrooms so that the kid in the back can actually hear what the teacher is saying. This is a big credit for our schools in the LEED rating system. Indoor air quality. It's important in regular buildings, and you heard that from several of the speakers today, but especially in schools. 1 in 5 kids is diagnosed with asthma these days. That means that any type of mold or off-gassing from fumes from products or finishes that were put in a school may trigger that asthma. Kid gets sick, they go home and they miss part of the classroom experience, and they get behind in their studies, and then they keep falling farther and farther behind. And then I think, as Deb Cyprian mentioned, the biggest expense in office buildings is the employees and their expense. Same thing with school districts. Their biggest expense is those teacher salaries. So whatever makes the kids sick also makes the teacher sick. And then they're home and they have to pay for a substitute teacher, so the school district is losing money in both ways. So the idea is to have low VOC products. I think everybody's heard of what a VOC is, volatile organic compounds. I think nobody heard that term before 10 years ago, and now everybody's using it in their homes for paints, for carpets and things like that, because that new car smell really wasn't really good for you. Or sniffing that, paper that we used to have, mimeograph paper. It was probably not really good. Maybe that's what happened. So anyway, and also the use of green cleaning products in a school so that we're not using harmful chemicals that also can trigger asthma or problems with health. One other thing that we talk about, and that's one of the reasons why I had our green ambassadors here, is the links with nature. At Cody High School, they've built an outdoor classroom. They've also put in garden beds where they grew vegetables last year, and they're expanding it to a community garden this year. They have also raised beds so that people who can't bend over or in a wheelchair can actually work with those beds too. They're talking about, around their school, they have many houses that are boarded up or burnt down halfway. So they're hoping in one block, right across the street from them, that 2 of those houses will be torn down, and they're going to put a physical fitness park in there. So this link to nature is especially important in urban settings because sometimes the kids don't have that link, and they get it at school. And the picture actually in the lower left-hand corner, that's a roof. So even if you have a tight area in an urban setting where you can't really have a whole lot of nature, you can start putting it on the roof as long as you have your structural engineer in line with that. So they learn about interacting with nature. I had to plant a garden in my backyard because my kids thought fruits and vegetables came from the grocery store. and this is what we were talking about, environmental stewardship. Kids learn about the environment. They actually do things with the environment. All those kids were part of the DPS Go Green Challenge, which is in its 3rd year in all the Detroit public schools. They challenged them to learn about energy savings. They started with a light bulb hunt and then moved on to other things. They actually met with their building engineers, learned about setback and how that affects things. They learned about powering down computers and copiers over Christmas. And in the first year, they had hoped that maybe 15 schools would sign up. They had actually 63 schools sign up, and 43 actually completed all their projects for a savings for the school district of $145,000 in energy bills. Now they're in their 3rd year, so it's up to the 300s of thousands. So. They also started recycling in their schools. There's 40 schools with recycling dumpsters, something that hadn't until this year actually even been done in the city of Detroit. And they've expanded it to school gardens, which they're using the food from the school gardens in their school cafeterias now. So while we were doing all these things, energy and water costs came down, student health and test scores went up. So why isn't everybody doing this? I think it was mentioned, everybody thinks it's more expensive to build to LEED standards. And actually, it used to be. In the beginning, nobody knew how to do it. The architects and engineers said, well, we don't know, so we got to add 5-10% onto my fee here. Contractors didn't know how to do it, so they added money onto their fee. So it used to be more expensive to build a LEED building. But now that the contractors found out that they actually save money doing this, less tipping fees with less construction waste generated, kind of makes them happy. So they don't have to charge extra anymore. Architects and engineers understand how the system works. Manufacturers have come up with products and that go to the LEED standards, so it should not cost you any more to build a LEED building anymore. In fact, sometimes it's actually less. And then what do we do with that money? We put it back into the schools, we buy more books, we add another teacher, we get computers. And a brief thing of what does this look like in real life. This is Martin Luther King Jr. Senior High School. The dark section over here, this was part of the 2009 Detroit Public Schools bond. They saved the auditorium, removed the rest of the school, and built a new section. So this went for LEED for new construction or major renovation, which was a major renovation. And I'll just go quickly through these. Sustainable sites, they placed the building in a place where they have transportation from city buses, school buses. People can walk to the school, people can ride their bikes. They remediated any problems that they had in the soils around the school. Sustainable sites, they also includes the light or white roofs. They put a white roof on there. And they also another specific credit just for schools is joint use of facilities, where they encourage the schools to be center of their communities and allow and design the school so the classroom portions can be locked off and the community can actually use some of the spaces for the school, which is great because it's not used. A building standing there unused all summer or in the evening is useless. So the community can come in and use part of this building. Water efficiency, they use low-flow toilets and energy-efficient appliances in their kitchen. And they also have no watering of their sod. Energy and atmosphere, the school is heated and cooled with the geothermal system. And so actually the building was designed with this giant, huge mechanical room. And it's got four little pumps in the corner of it, and a whole lot of other space where all the students like to gather and talk to the building engineer, and he says how nice and easy it is to run this school. They also improved the building envelope by using energy efficient windows and extra insulation. They conserved, they reduced the waste generated by construction, and they used materials that were high in recycled content, and used the low VOC paints for energy and for indoor environmental quality They have daylighting and controls where their lights actually turn off when the daylight is bright enough. And they did such a good job, they got an innovation and design credit for the reducing material use because they changed the whole framing system of the building. They went from steel framing to masonry bearing walls and concrete planks. So they saved a whole lot of materials for the building. And then they also used the school as a teaching tool. We took the USGBC, when it was here for a mid-year meeting, we took them to the school and we had the architects teach the students how to give a tour of all their green features in their school, from which this presentation came. And the students actually showed them around. And this was basically a year ago today. They received their LEED plaque. It was rated gold. And then everybody says, well, okay, that's just new buildings. Everybody can do everything wonderful with new buildings, but here's an example of an existing building. It doesn't happen to be in this area. It's in St. Paul, Minnesota, but the middle picture is what the school looks like on the outside, an old building, but what they did is they renovated the inside to eliminate the rabbit warren of stairways and bring in some light to the advantage of the students. And we are, as a Green Schools, actually working on a LEED for existing buildings with Clarkston High School, their Renaissance High School alternative education. There's some people in the room here that are working on that. We have about 20 volunteers from our chapter that are working on documenting that school. We ran into a hitch on their Energy Star score, so we're working on that right now. But if we finish that, that will be the first LEED for existing buildings school in the state of Michigan. Quick tools and resources. The Center for Green Schools has a website with practically every resource you want to have on it. It has information for architects, engineers, and teachers and parents. Some of the resources that they've come up with are how to green your existing schools. That's a facilities person's manual on checklists and things on how to green your school. There's a roadmap to green campuses that allow university campuses to chart a path to a greener campus. There's a guide to greening existing buildings. Something else that was mentioned before, the hands-on LEED or the LEED lab, which allows university students to kind of help you do voluntarily track and document LEED projects. There's partnered with the Princeton Review for the guide to green colleges, and we have Greening Our Schools, which is actually a guide for legislators in providing legislation for green schools. And then you have your local USGBC Green Schools Committee. Here's our Cody people with our folks from USGBC National last year. This is their school. Their school, Cody High School, actually has 3 schools in it. There's a public service academy, there's a medical academy, and then the Detroit Institute of Technology. And they've partnered with Bosch. They have a robotic arm in one of the classrooms, and they learn about robotics. They have GM, Bosch, us, and a few other people that have formed a team with Mr. Segrest in channeling some of the education that these kids get in that school. We also host a Green Apple Day of Service, which is in September, where we try to partner mentors or I had architects building greenhouses in Monroe County one year. We had people planting gardens another year, and tree plantings. And here was East English Village is also in Detroit. These are the student tour guides for their school, which is going for LEED Silver. I think that's it. There we go. High-performing schools need to be for everybody, not just the elite.